Welcome, everyone. My name is Gregory Q. Jenkins, and I'm the founder and CEO of Quintasia Studios. This is the Quintasia Podcast. Today, we will be speaking with filmmaker Delaina Waldron. I'm happy to announce we just made an agreement to acquire the rights to her film Era, and we've invited Delaina aboard today to have a conversation and chat. So welcome, Delaina, to the podcast.
Hello. Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. So let's get started. Let me ask, how did you get into writing? Tell me a little bit about how you got started.
Well, I originally wanted to be an actress, and I dreaded doing the auditions and memorizing lines and scripts, and I wanted to make it easier for myself. So I thought maybe if I could write my own story or screenplay, and I would be able to memorize the lines easier and know the character better. So I started writing, but then I just couldn't stop writing and I focused more on writing instead.
So you kind of you found and I take it that you find this side of the camera a little easier.
Yeah.
Uh, okay, we've been hearing that a lot lately. We had another member on the podcast about a couple of weeks ago. Same kind of journey. They started in front of the camera, and now they are behind the camera. Um, I noticed obviously we've had some conversations in preparation for today's podcast, and what came across to me is you seem to have an interest in the paranormal. What about that genre interests you?
Well, I'm Black and Hispanic, and I was raised by my Hispanic side, and they're really into paranormal. So it's to me, it's more, it's I get scared easily with paranormal because instead of a psychotic killer coming after you, you could fight the psychotic killer. You can't really fight a entity or some kind of
Mm.
spirit. You can't physically fight them, and they could do anything to you at any moment, and you don't even know. So I find it very interesting, and there's so many ways you could use paranormal and write about paranormal.
Well, it's definitely a big genre that's out there. There's a lot of interest. There's not a lot of, and I think because I've come across a few, there's not a lot of women who are directing in that genre. So obviously, if that's something you pursue, you would
Right.
be a trailblazer in that side. And I think it would pretty much bring in some new blood
Oh,
um, to the horror genre.
oh.
Is that something that you want to do?
Well, have one, but it's not actually horror. It's a comedy. It's a urban comedy, actually. It's get called Ghetto Ghost Hunters, and it's set in a housing project. Uh, the uh, the housing project, or the housing New York City housing has they focus on a certain housing project, and they're testing out a go green fuel. So they put the go green fuel in that housing project, but come to find out that go green fuel is able to make the spirits appear. Like it lets the spirits appear that's around. So when somebody gets killed in the basement, it emits the fuel, and it goes throughout the whole building, and all you see is a lot of people, annoying relatives or annoying friends, just start appearing and hassling each of the residents of the housing project. And there's a girl that's a paranormal enthusiast that actually has to help them because she's the crazy one in the block, but now they have to depend on her to help them get rid of the ghosts in the housing project. And it's her and her annoying brother and a couple of other friends, oddballs, as I can say. So it's interesting. That one I'm gonna try to I'm still trying to get that one out there.
Well, I would definitely, when you have a script for that, I would
Oh, I do.
definitely, oh,
I have it.
I would definitely like to take a look at that. That does sound kind of interesting there.
It's funny. It's
Um,
funny.
and that's a good example of the kind of fresh perspective that I think and why we're doing Equitasia, we're doing what we're doing in focusing on featuring diverse content makers. Not only and diversity for us is on a lot of different levels, not just racial, but also gender as well, and sexual orientation, all of that, and gender identity. Um, all of that, I think, makes for more interesting storytelling, and
Yes.
that's what we
Yes.
hope to do.
Thank you.
Uh, Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about the film in question that, and I hope we will be putting it out on our on-demand pages in a couple of weeks. It'll be ready, but you'll start seeing promos for it before then. Um, let's talk about Era and what was the inspiration for that short film that you did?
Oh, I personally admire and I admire Harriet Tubman. We both have a lot. I could say not too much with the slavery part, but we have a lot in common. She was actually a soldier in the military. She was enlisted, and I'm in the military also. And she there's another one. Well, she worked on the Underground Railroad. I mean, it wasn't literally a Underground Railroad,
Right.
but I do drive trains for the city, so it's a little
Well,
it's a little comparison. But I admire her. I admire her strength, and I thought to myself, how what would happen if I were able to talk to her and ask her questions and get her point of view, or her real point of view at least. Like, what would she say? And that's how I came up with the era.
I can tell you from my standpoint, one of my favorite parts because it is consistent when if we had a chance to talk to people who turn out to be important historical figures and heroes too, and I like the scene that you have with her when she's asked about being a hero and she's like, I'm not a hero. And most of these it's the that's usually not what's going through the person's mind at the time. They're just trying to find a way to survive the moment and do what they do. But I love that scene. I don't want to give too much away because I want people to see to see the film and enjoy it. But I think it was a great way to humanize Harriet Tubman. And of course, one quick question: how did you find the actors um,
Oh.
for the show?
Well, I posted mainly on I posted on Facebook, and I looked on Backstage. um and and the main actress, Christine Dixon, she didn't know about the audition. Somebody on Facebook tagged her and said, this is you should try. And she was like, oh, okay. So she contacted me, and I was like, and it went from there. She was the best one. She actually has her own one woman show as Harriet Tubman. She's done hundreds and hundreds of shows, a one woman show of Harriet Tubman.
And that comes through, in her
Yes,
performance. She knows her subject matter.
yes.
Uh, Great find. So
Thank you,
great job there.
thank you.
And
She'll
so,
love that. She'll love to hear you say that.
oh, well, definitely. We'd like to have her on the podcast
Oh
too. That
yeah.
would be great. But anyway, I'll stop trying to book future guests, and I will take just a short little break to let everybody know who may have joined our podcast, who didn't join our podcast at the top. This you're listening to the Quintasia podcast, and our guest today is Delaina Waldron. We are talking about her film era, which I'm happy to say will be shown on our branded content platforms very shortly. Also, I want to take a quick note to everybody. If you're listening to this podcast, no matter how you came across this, whether it be on Facebook, YouTube, um, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and anywhere else we happen to be, Apple, we not forget Apple. Um, Please subscribe to this podcast. What we're trying to do here is to have interesting conversations with people. We're building a community of diverse creatives, and we want to get people who are interested in having more diverse content together and to build this community. So, we're here, we've got our guests here. As I like to say in some of our ads, the only thing we're missing is you. So please subscribe to this podcast. So thanks a lot. And for those who have listened to our prior podcast, you know how we roll. It's our management team posing questions to our guests. So now I'm going to hand it over to our CTO, Harv Lacko, who will continue our conversation.
Delaina, welcome. We're happy to have you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I see that you've written some books as well. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, okay. Yes, thank you. My first book, Her Story, is actually a paranormal thriller, and it's set in the 1800s and during slavery times in America, and it's a Native American tribe that saves a group of African slaves that were in on their way to be transported to their their slave owners and stuff, and they're rescued and taken in by the Native American tribe. But one of the slaves, a young African slave woman called named Aida, she's psychic, and she has certain special powers that she's possessed, and she has to she's still struggling with her powers. She doesn't understand what her powers are, what she's dealing with, and her dead father, is haunting her and trying to take over her body and take over her powers, and at the same time she has to help the Native American tribe and what their future outcomes are going to be. She wants to change their outcomes and their deaths and prevent their deaths. So it's a paranormal thriller called Her Story. And I recently wrote a children's book called Buddies. It's about a rose and a bumblebee, a friendship between them. And the rose is getting bullied by a group of flowers in the garden. And the bumblebee helps her out. He's a little different himself. He has a short wing, so and he understands what she's going through, and he actually stands up for her. So that book actually shows children how to stand up for someone getting bullied, and empathizes with the person getting bullied.
Mm. What advice would you give to women of color who sort of want to follow in your footsteps in terms of film and books?
Well, if they're a writer, especially if they're a writer, they 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 need to keep writing no matter what. No matter what, just if as long as you keep writing, you'll get better and better and better. You No matter what, you just keep writing. But if you just sometimes you just can't wait for people to like your stories, and you know deep down inside they're good stories. You got to take it into your own hands and produce your own work, whether it's a screenplay or a book. Self-publish your book, or produce your own screenplay, and you'll learn the industry. You get to learn the industry better, and you'll hone in on your craft better too, and you'll be more independent and be able to keep writing and doing what you want to do.
So, an example, what's next for you, and what are you working on now?
Oh man, I just finished a TV pilot, a 1 hour TV pilot called Backroots, and that one is a time travel. It's a dramedy, but it's also has a time travel sci-fi involved. A black woman is sent to the 1800s again. She's sent back, but she's from the present, so she's sent back, and her character is she's a little obnoxious, and she's very outspoken, and she has PTSD. So the way she reacts to situations is a little outlandish, and when she's sent back, it gives a different point of view on what would you do if you were sent back and was made to become a slave and stuff like that? But oh hell no, I'm not going to become a slave. Hell no. So it's kind of like that. It's kind of like that. And she and also a white woman is accidentally sent back with her, but they're separated, of course, and in the 1800s. And I'm trying to show a mirror between them of their struggles, where a white woman dealing with 1800s and a black woman dealing just plopped into 1800s and deals and have their own ways of dealing with it. Of course, you'll know that the black woman is she's going to be put into slavery or have to deal with slavery at some point. But the white woman, although she's white, she still has her struggles too. And I'm trying to show that it's not too much privilege when it comes to white, but she's going to deal with the sexism and rape, or prevention of rape, or stuff like that, and independence of women. So I wanted to parallel that and show different parts of different views of stuff like that. So I have that back roots.
I tell you, I can't help but ask.
Yeah.
A little bit off script here.
Okay.
But your story about the Indians and the spiritualism. There's a place up in New York. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it or not, Lilydale.
Oh, it sounds familiar.
So it's a paranormal activity hotspot in the country. And interestingly enough, it was attended by the women's suffragette movement.
Oh.
And it's up near Buffalo. And I personally have been there, and I was a little frightened, I guess, the paranormal. And it's interesting because I could draw some alignments here with your, the Indian tribes. Apparently, I have some very strong Indian spirits watching over me. So as you were talking about the paranormal and the Indians and the suffragette, I just couldn't help but think, maybe one day when this pandemic is over, Greg, maybe we could do a field trip to Lilydale. And it's inspirational. I mean, I still have the charcoal drawing
He doesn't
of
look
the Indian.
too happy about that one.
I'm thinking to myself, I'm not a real big fan of the paranormal.
Well, it's spiritualism too. It's the paranormal is means different things to different people. You take
Right,
the lines of NASCAR and Peru interest me, and some of the shamanism that goes down in that part of the world. It's just struck me with the work you're doing. If you weren't familiar with the suffragette movement and the paranormal up in that area of New York, and since we're all from New York, and interestingly enough, it ties in as well, because the way the suffragettes used to get there was the train used to go up to that area of New York back in the day. And that's how the suffragettes, when they were on their way to DC, they would often stop in upstate New York to get readings and energize their spirituality. So,
That's nice.
Delaina, it's been a real pleasure talking to you, and Greg will tell you and our listeners, I always have a story for almost every occasion and go off script. So, Delaina, I look forward to working with you and being part of our Quintasia community. And, it just always works out in these podcasts. Yeah. So podcast listeners, I always find a way to tie in and get a hook into our guests.
You went full circle. Like you put a train in that, you put suffrage, and you put Native Americans and spirits. That was nice.
Yeah, Greg will tell you, I always have a hook somewhere. I don't know where it comes from, but I get inspired by Quintasia and our guests. And podcast listeners, I will always give you that off the wall, off script perspective, so that helps you get to know our guests in our community. With that, I'll turn it back to Greg.
I can truly vouch for the off the wall part. So, ladies and gentlemen, but it's amazing. There's always a story. There's always a tie-in. But as Delaina said, I mean, that was pretty good, ladies and gentlemen. Tie all those things in there. I don't know how he does it. Just happens every week we do that, but you know, that's that's what we're about here, and this is why we want to have these conversations. And the main thing that I want to impress upon people who again may be coming upon this podcast is I am not one to sit back and wait for something to happen. We are not powerless. If there is content that you want to see, then what I encourage people is to get involved, get into a community. Hopefully, maybe you like what we're doing here, get involved with us, or if maybe something else is your thing, get involved with that community. But we have the power to create the content that we want to see. We don't have to sit back and wait for Hollywood to recognize, hey, that there's some great stories out there. Let's just go make it. And I guarantee you, if we do well, and I believe we will do well with these stories, Hollywood will follow. Uh, uh, they're not going to say, "Oh wow, look at these guys making money over here," or "Look at these ladies making money over here." No need for us to pay attention. Let's go on and do something else. People will pay attention. So that's my hope for everyone. Um, well, this has been, we really enjoyed getting to know you. We
Thank you.
hope that this is, the first of many conversations with you. We
You too.
want
Thank
to stay in touch with you. And as you, like I said, we're trying to build a community here. And we are sincere in our desire to, keep a line of communication on with all of our podcast guests, and hopefully we'll build something big in the future, and get our audience members excited about the content that's being put forth
Well,
out there.
also, Greg, we're building the synergy as we build our community with people like you, Delaina,
thank you.
and our audience gets to know us. I see that the synergy between us, hopefully some of my off the wall comments have inspired you maybe to research some of the suffragettes
Well, I'm thinking
experience in
we should
paranormal.
do some kind of a reality and just take a camera with us and go experience it.
Well, you know what? I've been there, and you actually can capture on camera. Uh,
Woo, that's crazy.
they actually we have pictures of orbs and things like that, and there's places that where the suffragettes stayed, and there's a whole backstory to that. So
Oh, that's nice.
it hopefully this has been helpful to you as we get to know more
Thank you.
about you. You get to know about us, and if you ever need a crazy out of the wall, off the wall idea, feel free to come join us at Quintasia to talk to me. If you want the
Thank you.
mainstream, talk to Greg.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I'm not just mainstream, but definitely for the paranormal, you can call hard. You can, harmful.
Okay.
I don't know if I want ghosts. I got enough things going on in my head. I don't need to add paranormal.
Well,
You see how
I
your
like the
reaction is?
green.
That's how they are in the Ghetto Ghost Hunters. Your reaction would be funny if you went. That would be funny.
Yeah, everybody is a character, and Greg could play that character very well.
Yes, I wouldn't be acting because it's like I I like they interest me. I'll since we're on the topic, true story confession. To this day, even though there's certainly more intense films that are out there, The Exorcist, I cannot watch that film at night. Cannot do it.
Exactly.
Just cannot do it. I can
Yeah.
watch it as long as there's daylight. I am fine, no problem. If I watch that thing at night, I am not sleeping that night. To this day.
Well, you know what, Greg? That was my reluctance when I started going down that road. I mean, I didn't want anything to do with it. I was frightened of it, and it took a while before people said that it's all about how you interact and how you go about doing it. You know, there's good and bad in everything in this world, and there's good and bad in the spiritual world as well. But it took me a while to actually wrap my head around the fact that there could actually be good spirits as well as bad spirits. And I was always told the reason they're spirits is because they didn't pass through the passageway and they were stuck on Earth because they had unfinished business. Now, I don't profess to know everything about spirituality and everything, but I do know if you study ancient times, all the way back to, you know, Buddhism, things like that, there's always a spirituality associated with it. So there must be something to it, Greg. You know, it's not just frightening. There's got to be something more to that.
Well, from a pure perspective of a film, um, what makes the concept so frightening is because, as you said, Delaina, it's you can't see it.
Yes.
And then it allows your imagination to run wild as to defining what this thing is.
Yeah.
And the very idea that, you know, this spiritual being could harass you and there's basically nothing you can do.
You're helpless.
You're helpless. That's what brings in, you know, that feeling. And that's why it's a good topic
Yeah.
for horror. So I think, you know, it's good ground, and we wish you well in all of your endeavors, paranormal and normal. Uh, so, ladies and gentlemen, we have been talking with Delaina Waldron today. She is the creator of the short film Era, as I said, which we will be showing very shortly. Thank you so much for dropping by. I thank everybody for listening to our podcast today. Once again, please subscribe to our podcast, and we hope that you will come back and, you know, see our next episode. So, on behalf of Hard Flacco and our guest today, Delaina Waldron, thanks a lot for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.